Mindset Podcast. We're your guide as you make your way through life, getting better 1% every day. We believe that life is lived and true victory won through adversity. Nothing easy is ever worth it. We believe in the warrior ethos and support those that choose to walk that path.
All right, what's up? How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Gene?
Cool. I checked the records. You were on this show like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Remote.
I know it was 2020. So.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, 2020. And it's 2022. It's not really, feels like it's not changed that much.
Sometimes I think like 2020, like I don't even know how to reference. I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody and I was like, was that 2 years ago or 3? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's hard. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely, pre-2020, post-2020.
Yeah,
it's
kind of nuts.
weird.
It's kind of nuts. Well, Fiona, thanks for coming on the show again in person. How about that?
I know, this is much more fun. Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about all the stuff you do, not work-wise, all the actual fun stuff. Right? So you not just, I don't know when, maybe just got back from
Scotland.
I didn't want to say it wrong. Tyree.
Yeah.
Ultramarathon.
Mm-hmm.
You're an ultramarathoner. How long have you been doing that?
I guess I technically am an ultramarathoner because I've now done my first ultramarathon on the Isle of Tyree.
I would claim it.
Okay. I usually just say I'm a triathlete. So I've been...
I got that wrong. I was so happy with getting you on here and then I got it wrong.
That's okay. So I've been I actually was just thinking about this the other day. I did my first triathlon 10 years ago, August 12th, 2012. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I've been doing triathlon for 10 years and I've done all the distances all the way from sprint all the way up to Ironman. I did my first full distance Ironman last year.
What's the difference between a sprint and an Ironman? So
sprint distance is just the shortest distance triathlon you can have. And it's usually something like 500-meter swim, 12 to 16 mile bike, and then a 5K run at the end.
Okay.
That's where I started. Some people are glutton for punishment and start with the big long distance triathlon. So, an Ironman is 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a marathon at the end. I didn't do that. I took 10 years before I did the full distance Ironman, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in triathlon to build up that way.
So the Ironman is like the ultra marathon of the marathons.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
you just now only consider yourself an ultra marathoner.
Yeah, because I did.
But you've done an Ironman.
I've done 2 Ironmans now.
So yeah.
And my dad was a marathoner, and so in my triathlon journey, he just was only interested in the running aspect, and so he was always like, "Well, when are you going to do a marathon? When are you going to do a marathon?" And I said, "I'll do a marathon in an Ironman." And he's just like, "Why?" Yeah. And I'm like, that's just the way it is. So I've never done a standalone marathon. I've only ever done 26.2 miles after a 112 mile bike and a 2.4 mile swim. So a nice 6-hour warm up before doing the 26.2.
Easy.
And then the Tyree ultramarathon is 35 miles, and an ultramarathon is any running distance over the standard 26.2 marathon. And I didn't intend to be an ultramarathoner, but
accidental.
It's so the Isle of Tyree is a tiny island off the west coast of Scotland. It's in the Inner Hebrides. It's the furthest west you can go in the Inner Hebrides.
That's where you grew up, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I grew up there in the 80s, there was 800 people, and now it's down to 650 people. So a really small island, but I still have, as social media is, Facebook, you have someone that you went to school with 30 years ago. And
if there's only 600 people there, I would imagine.
Yeah. And so last year, someone that I went to school with back then tagged me because obviously he saw me doing all these Ironman and all that, and was like, "You should come to Tyree and do the ultramarathon." And I was like, "Okay, why not?" So, so that is why I did the ultramarathon. I can't say that I'm out there seeking other ultramarathons, although maybe that will happen.
So that was sort of like a trip home, as well as the ultra marathon thing.
Absolutely. So yeah, I hadn't been back. So my dad was Scottish and my mom's American, and so I was born here in Lexington Medical Center, and then my family moved over to the Isle of Tyree when I was like 2,
Mm,
and we lived there from 84 to 1990, and then we moved back to South Carolina. But every summer up until I went to university in 2000, we still had the house there. So I spent all of my
that's cool.
summers over in Tyree. And so it's a really, a really nice place with warm memories for me. Um, in 2000, I went back to Scotland and lived in Glasgow. I studied at University of Glasgow and stayed there for 10 years. And so I did go to the island a little bit, but not that often. But the last time I'd been back to Tyree was 2013, so it had been a really long time. And then, like
Wow.
I said, I had someone tag me on Facebook and throw the challenge out there,
Huh.
and I just thought this would be a really good opportunity. My sister also was getting married in Ireland the following weekend, and so I was like, "What if we do this the weekend before, and then we all fly to Ireland?"
Nice. Yeah.
And so it was a really nice excuse to get like me and my sister and my mom, and then my sister and I brought our husbands
Right.
to kind of show them
That's
what
cool.
it is, because Tyree is like just a super unique place that you can show photos of, but until you go there, it's hard to like understand it. It's just a different pace of life. So
Got you.
mhm.
Well, 600 people, it's not very many people.
No, I think there's more sheep and cows,
Okay.
to be honest.
Well, the imagery looks beautiful. So you ran around the rim. You
Mhm.
call it a rim?
I guess
Beach? I
the
don't know.
outside of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
island.
yeah, the outside of the island. So
Yeah,
the race went around it. So
which is super cool as
was it
well.
just long enough to be an ultra marathon? To be
Yeah.
that 30 something miles?
Yeah, exactly. So it is advertised as 35. My watch read 34, but my
Okay.
coach was like, "Oh, the GPS, we're
Claim
calling
it.
it 35." Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So it was a really cool way to
Mhm.
explore the island, because it is a small island, clearly, if you can do the entire circumference and it's only 35 miles. And it was over beach and rocks and some on the road, and then a fair bit of hiking on the back end. Um, and it was places I'd never been to on the island. It's a small island, but it was fun to explore places that even in the many, many years that we were there, that I would never have gone to unless I
Sure.
was doing
Oh,
that.
wow.
Mhm.
Wow. So there were places you've never been to as you're in. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, because my dad would take us out. Being a small island, there's not like a ton of stuff to do, and so our summers were spent like if it's sunny, you're out, and so we would ride our bikes around and
Right.
walk through the fields and like play in the streams or on the beach. But one part in particular on the backside of Ben Heinisch. Ben Heinisch is like it's not a mountain, it's a big hill.
Mm.
Was like real hiking. And so my dad never took us over to that side. I
Oh.
don't think he would know how to get over there. I mean, I was lucky when we got to that bit that there were other people around me, because I didn't see all the signs. It wasn't
Oh, wow.
it's not a trail. It's just like
Go.
navigate.
Yeah.
And so I was very happy that there was a woman in front of me who's like, "There's a sign." And I'm like, "Thank God,
Okay.
I don't know where we are." So yeah.
Wow. All right. So let's back it up some more then. You got into this because of your father. So is this something you did when you were younger when he was doing it? Or is this something he did later and you did later?
In terms of marathoning.
Triathlons, marathonings, like just going behind him, or were you in front of him? Like, how did that work?
No, so my dad was an older father, so he was 47 when I was born. So previous to being married and having a family, he was in the US Air Force and the RAF, but he was also an alcoholic and a heavy smoker.
Okay.
And so he got sober in his late 20s, I think. I think he managed to get 50 or 60 years sobriety in the end and stopped smoking. And so he started jogging for fitness, because that's, you
what you
change
do.
your
It's
life
free.
and it's
Yeah.
what happens. So growing up, I watched my dad running all the time and doing 10Ks and marathons. He did like, the New York Marathon before there was a lottery,
wow.
and the Boston Marathon before there was a
Wow.
lottery,
Yeah.
and the London Marathon and Glasgow and stuff. So
That's legit.
he did those, yeah. Although I always have to say before the lottery, because you could just sign up and do it. I don't think I would get into like Boston these days, but so and so growing up, I played sports. I really liked soccer, um, And then I went to university, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity as a woman to be athletic.
Mm.
And so I did the heavy drinking and the drugs and all that sort of stuff. And then I got to my late 20s. I was like, I need to like calm this down and started running myself.
Like it worked for him.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started running myself because it's free. You just get the shoes and you
Yep.
go out the door.
Yep.
But I tended to get a lot of injuries just because we live a sedentary life, right? And so you go out and you just run and your legs are all wobbly.
Yeah, it's not a good idea.
And you get the IT band issues. And so I had all of that. My brother had gotten into cycling. And so I was like, well, my dad's into running, my brother's into cycling. I really like to swim, so I'll just do a triathlon. And it's because it's a swim, bike, run. And that helped me because it's cross training. And so I didn't have all the sort of IT band issues and that sort of thing. So my dad always used to say, well, I didn't tell my kids to get into running, but here they are. So he didn't push us. But at the same time, clearly he was an influence to see an adult being athletic. I think I struggle with that in my community where there's such a push for kids to be athletic during school and high school. And then unless you're a college athlete, it's like nothing. And so, in my county, I'm just like, when I'm talking about like, I want to be able to go for a run and all you providing is like 0.4 mile walking tracks. Like you're not serving, the adult community. Like, why is it so strange to think that an adult would want to continue to be physically fit? Like
it is weird.
They don't even allow in Kershaw County yet, calling them out. They don't allow the public to use the high school tracks, even though.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's borderline like that here in the city where it's like, there's some you can just do and no one will bother you, but I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to be there.
But I mean, that's crazy.
It's like, what? It's a track.
It's a track. It's a public track. It's like, paid for by our taxes.
I paid those taxes. Yeah, for sure.
But it's like, why as an adult would you want to be here unless you're trying to like be nefarious?
I'm just trying to run around in a circle.
Yeah. And like, I can't run on the road because I'm going to get run over.
That's right.
And y'all say I'm silly for running on the road. I mean, the spaces for being physically fit in public in this part of the world are abysmal.
It is for sure. You're part of, or not say part of, I mean, you're like the only voice I hear, like in that whole area, Kershaw, Florence area, Camden area. I mean, like the zit, I mean, what have you encountered so far?
I mean, there are,
I see you all the time on Facebook, just like pointing out so-and-so got hit by a car or this was terrible, like whatever.
Yeah. So I got really into like advocacy for pedestrian and cyclist rights starting in 2018. Kershaw County is mostly a rural county. The main town is Camden, but it's also very close to Columbia. Like I live in Lugoff, which is
30 minutes away.
Yeah, it's just 30 minutes away. And so our county is experiencing like rapid residential development. And so there's just a ton more people in our county. With more people on the road. So whereas I moved back to Kershaw County in 2012, I used to be able to go out and run and ride and not really have issues with cars because there just wasn't a lot of people in cars. In 2018, I had my first death threat by a lovely older couple coming from church who came up behind me blasting their horn and almost hit me with their wing mirror. But then they got stuck at the stoplight. And so I rolled up on them and said, like, roll down your window. And they're like, no. And I was like, you could have killed me. Could have been. And they're like, get off the road. You're not supposed to be on the road. And then it was like going nowhere. And I was finally like, do you want to kill me?
Right.
And they were like, yes. And it was just gobsmacking that the anger and the entitlement of people in cars to think that the road is only for people in cars. And I mean, that's not just an individual issue. The way our roads are built are only with cars in mind and people in cars.
Right.
Again, the only public spaces we have, though, are the roads because they're not building parks or common areas or walking trails longer than a mile. Kershaw County, like
especially in the rural areas, it's like
exactly
there's no options,
and that's intentional. But because we could do better. So I started. I got video cameras for me and my husband on our bike because another issue is like especially being a woman, people don't want to listen to you. So I'm like, well, I'm going to show you what I'm going through. I took it to the
Right.
sheriff's office and he listened, but he's also like, that's the way our roads are built and there's not much we can do. Do you want me to have a deputy ride with you every time you ride your bike? I'm
Well,
like, that's
not the point.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
I know, right?
That's not the point, brother.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm showing you these videos. Is there anything you can do? I have license plates and
Yeah.
everything.
Can we? Yeah.
And he made an effort. He did knock on some people's doors, but I think he's not done much since then. So then I started at the county level, like, why is this so bad? Where is the funding to like improve our roads? If you're going to repave a road, why can't we consider doing a sidewalk or a bike lane or something, or putting crosswalks or slowing this road down?
Yeah, we're in the woods.
I mean, and the amount of excuses that you receive is incredible. So it's all passing the buck, basically. Like, oh, we don't have the money. There's funding there. Why don't you apply for this? Or we don't have anyone who's going to do that. You know, saying to me, I had a former SCDOT guy who is a consultant for some reason on our county transportation committee say to me, well, why don't you apply for the alternative transportation funding through SCDOT? And I'm like, I'm a private citizen. Why isn't the county applying for that? Like, I can't apply for SCDOT funds.
Yeah, I'm not the county.
Exactly. But they have all these excuses. And then finally I presented all of that to our county council in, I guess it was 2021. And then they put me on the planning commission. So
you can't say no. You have to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really was just like, before I say yes to this, is this a rubber stamping committee? I'm not going to sit here and just like pass everything through. Like, I'm going to come in here with everything I've been advocating about. And they're like, yeah, no, you've got power and you can change hearts and minds. And I'm a year and a half in and yeah, I'm trying, but I don't know if I've changed any hearts and minds besides, I don't know. I guess someone has to be there making people question the status quo.
You're like, I just want to ride my bike on the road.
I also we need to create a future where the requirement that you have to have a car to be a member of society is ridiculous.
It is.
And, as we have this suburban sprawl and it's getting more expensive for people to live in the metro areas like Columbia, they come out to the cheaper areas like Kershaw County and they might not have reliable transportation. I see more and more people on bikes and walking to go to the grocery store and get to their job.
Yep.
And, we're supposed to be that pull yourself up by your bootstraps country. And yet we make it
as long as you have a car.
Exactly. We make it so incredibly difficult to do that for the people who need to pull themselves up.
There's a lot of long-standing issues there, though. It's not just about riding a bike. There's it's racial issues. It's, I would say it's just the way it is in the South, but all those things combined. I mean, there's some long history that you have to fight through.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like the majority of pedestrians and people on bikes who are killed are overwhelmingly African-American or indigenous, period. And it's like an economic thing that they're economically disadvantaged and don't have the car. It's also the fact that people may see them not as people. I mean, it's horrendous. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way if we could actually plan it properly and think outside of what we're used to doing instead of just like plowing another road.
I've ridden a bike once around where I live in West Columbia. Like literally once. I took it out for like a 20-mile thing and I was heckled twice. Yeah. And I was like, screw this. Like, I'm not doing this, Like literally a guy threw something at me and then on the other side of town, they were like, they're like calling me names and stuff.
It's horrible.
Like what?
Yeah. And my dad.
I'm just riding a bike on the sidewalk. Like I get it. I mean, I can only imagine what it's like in, Kershaw County or.
Yeah, I mean, my dad has those stories of him running in the 90s in Camden and having someone throw like a soft drink cup at him. It's like, what is the aggression and the anger?
What do you think that is?
I personally think it's deep down, people are very unhappy with their lot in life. Like maybe I'm in front of someone who's trying to get to work and they're late and they're pissed off and they see me not doing something productive and they take the anger out on me. It's a reflection of whatever they're feeling at the time, because I also say in Kershaw County, like how come these drivers don't know how to go by a pedestrian or a cyclist safely,
Right,
but they know how to
right.
drive around a tractor
Yeah.
or the garbage
Yeah,
truck
for real.
or the post truck.
Right.
Like those people are not
Right.
experiencing the anger, the level of anger that I receive as a person walking or a
Right.
person riding a bike. And it's the perception that we're doing something not productive or, recreational or something along those lines.
We, in my gym, we see this with people, when new members or whatever, and they're trying to work on their diet, right? And so they'll start doing things that people do when they start trying to change their lives. They'll like, I'm only eating this, maybe this time of day or whatever, and their family will see them, and their family will get mad at them and like, what, are you too good to eat our dinner? Are you what? You can't do this with us? Like, what's your problem? Like, we'll see that. And then also, like, if you're like a smoker, or you're, you do tobacco of some other kind, and you try to quit, like I've heard stories. I've never done that myself, but I've heard stories from people who are trying to quit, of the amount of people that are like, oh, come on, you want this, or just like messing with you. I think you're right. It's really weird, isn't it? Like, what is that?
It's an insecurity. It's definitely like, yeah, it's
It's weird to say, like, it has nothing to do with you.
Mhm.
It has everything to do with them. You're just the thing that gets stuff thrown at.
Yeah,
Isn't that weird?
it is, but I mean, it's the reality. It's
Yeah.
like it is nothing to do with me. Like, but I mean, it doesn't make it nice. I don't like people
No,
telling
not
me
at
they're
all.
gonna like run me over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not. I don't need that
Definitely
negative
don't need to
energy,
run over.
or kill my dog or whatever. But it is
So insane.
my husband says to me sometimes, like, everyone's a dump truck and they're just like throwing their trash out. And so if you're receiving into that is their trash that they're throwing out at you.
But I don't want your trash, though.
Exactly. I don't want it. I just want to bounce it back.
Why do I have to clean your shit up?
We all just need to like go to therapy. We need a massive therapy
We
session.
should all start a podcast and some therapy. Wow. So how's it? I mean, where do you stand with all that now? All that fight, and you're just saying you were on the what board was that?
The planning committee, County
committee,
Planning
yeah.
Commission. So the things that come across our desk are like site plans for large residential developments and then rezoning requests. And so it is, I've slowly trying to change the way the Planning Commission reviews or asks things of developers. Unfortunately, a lot of the Planning Commission have been in their roles for 5 or 10 years. So they're really ingrained in just doing things the way they've done. I remember my first meeting I went to was a site plan to build like 140 townhomes in downtown Lugoff. And I said, I don't necessarily have a problem with this. It's infill housing and it's high density. So, less land is used to house more people. But, these houses are going to be within a quarter mile of the post office and the bank and the restaurants and the food and the groceries. So, how do we make these people be able to walk across the street?
Connect them.
And the chairman was like, we don't have anything to do with that. And I was like,
but you have everything to do with it.
Yeah. And then the planning director was like, no, these are the conversations we need to have.
Yeah.
But I still didn't get anywhere because it was like the ingrained habits of this planning commission was like, we are only looking at things in this square and not looking at anything else that's going on.
Man.
So I'm still pushing and working on that and bringing the same points up. Small successes. Our ordinances, we have to change our ordinances. Anyway, give you an example. Our current Kershaw County ordinances require sidewalks only on one side of the street within a housing development. And I'm just like, that makes no sense. Why don't you have it on both sides of the street?
Yeah,
and people will be like, but what about the impermeable surfaces? I'm like, please stop.
You live in the country.
Stop. Like,
You live in the
sidewalk is going to like flood this place. Can we just talk about parking minimums? Like,
you live in the country. Yeah.
What are you talking about? If you're worried about impermeable surfaces, then we need to like not build any of this,
You're just full of crap.
You just, So, I did manage to push Mungo Homes to put in sidewalks on both sides of their street and painted crosswalks and a pedestrian pathway that cut through these horribly designed neighborhoods where if you were going to walk from the far end of the neighborhood to the swimming pool, that you would have to walk some ungodly distance, when if you just walk through the middle of the houses, you would get there directly, right? That's the idea of thinking about people moving themselves, not just
Yeah.
in automobiles, right? And so we managed to get all of that because in reality, in the grand cost of these developments, that's very little. It's the bare minimum we can ask.
You're just flattening everything anyway and building.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a small win. The real win would have been to like block it, because I don't think we need to have that style of development. But I don't know, just chipping away. I did. Now I'm trying to like see in a harm reduction manner if we can get like impact fees put in. So an impact fee is, if a developer's coming to our county and they're building 200 houses or 400 houses, which are site plans that we've had on our desk, like 490
Wow.
houses.
It's a big neighborhood.
Right? That they have to pay impact fees to offset the cost that the county is taking on to increase service to that many people. So that many people are going to affect the level of service on our roads.
Right,
It's going to
right.
affect the school system, which
It will.
parents are already
absolutely
complaining.
will.
Yeah, parents already complain in Lugoff Elgin High School that there's at lunch the kids have to sit on the floor because they
Right.
don't have enough tables and chairs.
Right.
It's going to affect the emergency services. And right now, the developers don't pay anything towards that. So I have to present to the county council next month as a harm reduction manner that they would consider starting to put impact fees in, because if we're going to let these developers come in and build at that size, they need to take on some of the liability that they're bringing to the area.
Right.
It's not a win. It's not perfect because what they're not carrying, and I'm sorry, this is becoming a planning commission thing, but it's on my mind. The suburban development model that they're not planning for is that these developers come in and build the infrastructure, and that's the roads and the sewers and the lights and all that. That all deteriorates, and the county picks up the maintenance costs in about 20 to 25 years, and tax revenue never, ever covers the cost of the maintenance. And so Kershaw County has not yet fallen into that suburban development hole. Other places have, and yet these developers are coming in and they're just, I'm like, look at these other places, municipalities all over the country who are broke in debt.
You're not going to be able to support that many people.
So why are we building in this way?
Well, right. And then not to mention, I mean, that it impacts what you're talking about, using the area for whatever you want. That's not in a car. They're not upgrading the roads. They're not building any infrastructure. They're just building the buildings on top of the land.
Yeah.
I mean, they do that here in Lexington,
Yes.
There's certain parts of like the local area here. I mean, you can't, certain times of the day, just don't go there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually try to use Lexington County as an example. In Kershaw County, I'm like, do you want us to become Lexington County? Because
it's even like that in the Low Country. Like my family lives down there. It's even worse down there. I mean, you're talking like a 400 home development. They have like 1,400 home development. It's like ridiculous. On top of like swampland, that's a different thing. But
yeah, I mean, we have a bit of that. Lugoff Elgin is like the home of earthquakes right now.
Right.
So we have our own stuff going on. And like chemical spills and like, gold mine pollution. I mean, all in all, Kershaw County is like on that brink. We have so much potential. Yeah. But that urge of development is just like trying to get us in there. And
it seems like, it's great, right? I imagine if your leadership in that county, it seems really good. It feels good. They're building a bunch of stuff here. Like it's good activity, but not necessarily.
I mean, I don't know. The thing is, listening to my neighbors and, seeing what's said on Facebook, I have yet to come across a Kershaw County citizen who is excited about this. Everyone is like, the schools are crowded, our roads are a mess, blah, blah. So, in terms of like who's excited about this, besides the developer, I don't know. And I mean, I guess I don't know if the planning department, like the staff, have goals as to how much development they bring in, I'm
sure they do.
They probably do. Yeah. The way these things are, whatever your KPIs are certainly towards like increasing tax revenue, which means putting more people in the
tax-based people.
Yeah. But like I said, we're not taking into account that the tax base never covers the cost of maintenance on this infrastructure.
Right. Well, do they know who they're dealing with?
It's at
do they know that they're dealing with a triathlete ultramarathoner that doesn't know how to quit?
I mean, I've had to tell them that. I mean, it's at the point when I meet people in the county now and I say, my name's Fiona Martin, and they're like, "Oh, I've heard of you."
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like, okay, yeah, I'm sure you have, and the triathlon thing is like, I mean, it's funny the silly, stupid things that men have said to me about my triathlon training. I've had someone say, "You should do all of your training inside."
What?
Yeah.
Let's unpack that. That's another reason why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're pretty vocal about that stuff too.
Yeah.
Why would they tell you to train inside?
So
Because we don't want to look at you?
No.
I mean, what is the deal?
I think it is, and this is from a man who's done an Ironman, so it's not someone who's not done one. And he said, I did all my training inside. And I mean, side note, I did have to look up his times, and my times were faster than his. So, I mean, I'm not taking his advice. I tried to tell him very kindly, I don't think my coaches would be okay with that. If I had to put myself in his shoes and that sort of mentality, it is the triathlete who is doing the distance for ego. To say I'm an Ironman, or say, and there's plenty, they tend to be men.
Yes.
I know, like I said, I started triathlon at the shortest distance. It was like, this is a challenge, I'm going to do it. And I worked my way up to Ironman.
Right.
The ego triathlete is the one who says, I'm going to do triathlon, and I'm going to do the longest triathlon I can do.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. And I know them. And so
you're telling me that there are athletes that have a big ego.
Yeah, I know, right?
You expect me to believe that?
I know.
Okay. Just making sure.
So if you're coming from an ego standpoint where your goal is to like cross that finish line so you can then say, I've done this, then maybe training indoors makes sense to you because you're just trying to get across that finish line. For me, I'm really like, triathlon is a lifestyle. It gives me the vehicle to get outside. To, for example, in my training yesterday, my coach said, go do a happy swim. So my happy swim was to go down to the local lake, put my wetsuit on, and swim in that lake.
Cool.
Right. And maybe I shouldn't need to have like triathlon as an excuse to experience nature like that, but like it kind of keeps me out there. So swimming in the lake, and that's what's great about ultra marathoning is usually it's not that on the road. It's like you're in the woods or in the mountains or on the beach or whatever.
Be cool. Yeah.
And so, yeah, for me, it's a lifestyle of being outside, of moving my body. It is not the idea of doing all my training inside is like soul crushing.
Yeah. I mean, to put you on like 60 miles on a fixed bike, that would be pretty gross.
Yeah. And I mean,
I run on a treadmill for
I know,
10 miles. I mean, what the hell?
And there's people who do it. Yeah. And I feel for people who are just getting into fitness and trying to make a change in their life, because I think a lot of times their first place to do that is at the gym. And as someone who's physically active, like the gym is my last resort, right? I really hate going to the gym. It's like not a horrible place, but I don't want to do 10 miles in the treadmill. I don't want to go, and I need to do strength work as well, right? And I don't like the going into the weight room with the men and like having to deal with the grunting and the mirror stuff just for me to get my like 10-pound weights, you know?
Yeah.
So it's sad. It misses a point when someone says you should just do all of your training inside. It's not the life I want to live.
What else have you heard?
That I should ride my bike with a rifle strapped to my back if I don't want to be harassed.
Really?
Yeah. So that's like, again,
well, that's just impractical.
Yeah, it is impractical. It's also like
just carry a pistol. Beside the point.
I'm thinking of like if I had like a dummy pistol, so it looks like so it looked like I had it. I really don't want to like have an actual live arm, and I've never even. I don't want to do that, but maybe if I had something that looked like that,
just a giant machete, maybe.
Oh God, it's like that. It's almost victim blaming in a sense. It's got that feel to it. It's got that. I just want to say the perpetrator of the violence is the other person. Yes. Why am I responsible for counteracting their violence?
Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. It's the same as when people are like, oh, these cyclists need to wear bright clothes and people need to cross the street, the crosswalk. It's like, just don't kill people. Can we try that?
You're not wrong. Yes. Wow. Wearing a rifle. That's interesting. So, I mean, what's the harassment level like for you? I mean, we've talked about being just kind of things thrown at you or whatever, but that seems like it's kind of equal opportunity.
Yeah,
harassment.
I haven't had things thrown at me. I will say I'm
Oh,
lucky on that. I just usually get like,
so I've got one up on you.
yeah,
then. Okay.
I don't remember having anything thrown at me.
Cool.
I've had the old couple tell me they wanted to kill me.
Yeah.
I had a guy who I caught at a gas station who'd like been aggressive with me, and I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, next time I see you, I'm gonna run you over. And I'm just like, okay. I was like, then you're going to
Jesus.
jail,
Yeah.
buddy. You know.
It's called murder.
People yelling stuff out the window,
Mhm.
and then it comes and goes in the season. It's interesting because I do ride outside less during the winter just because it's cold,
Well, yeah,
right?
it's colder.
And then so when you start going back out in March and April, like it's clear the drivers are not used to seeing a cyclist, and so they get a bit like kind of like, and I mean silly stuff like, I was riding once in a van past me and it gave me all the room in the world. There was no one coming. They got in the other lane.
Yeah.
And so no big
Yeah.
deal. And then the driver just sticks his hand out the window and gives me the finger. I'm like, what is like, why? Like, I didn't hold you up. I'm just a person. You passed me
You're being
safely.
cool.
And then you're just like, F you.
It's so weird.
I did do a campaign last year called Slow Down, Give Room, because I think there's a few reasons why pedestrians and people on bikes are passed unsafely. And one of them is that anger issue, that like truly unhappy person. Some of it is really someone doesn't know what to do. Like they come up on a cyclist or pedestrian and it freaks them out. And so if it freaks them out, what I think you should do in the car is maybe tap the brakes and figure out the situation before moving forward.
It's usually
some people speed up.
Yeah, I've seen that.
They're like, oh my God, there's a car coming and there's a cyclist. And so I'm going to go as fast as I can and get around this cyclist. And so what I wanted people to understand is like, if you see it, just slow down and then give room when it's safe to do so. The same way you would with a tractor. You're not going to like speed up to go around the tractor.
Yeah,
you
we somehow have that figured out.
And so I did like a sort of like yard sign campaign to put that message out at like major areas in Kershaw County. And anecdotally, I had people tell me that it made the situation better.
Okay.
So I think there's certainly room for driver education. And South Carolina does a really poor job of educating its drivers on how to drive around different things.
Yeah.
So one of my friends who's an activist in this area actually reached out to South Carolina Department of Public Safety and managed to get them to update some information on their website in regards to how to drive safely around pedestrians and cyclists. Although, unfortunately, the mentality is they still focus on how pedestrians and cyclists should prevent themselves from being hit, which is wearing bright clothes.
Well, yeah.
Instead of the reality of like, the person driving the 4,000-pound truck.
I will tell you, having a child that turned driving age during COVID, they were literally talking about doing away with the ride along test.
Okay.
Which was like, well, that's such a bad idea. And ultimately, they all decided it's a very bad idea. We do need to have 16-year-olds make sure they can drive. But yeah, I mean, I would say, generally speaking, it's a very bad job.
Yeah.
Like across the board.
Yeah. South Carolina drivers are bad.
Like bicyclists are like, there's so much more work to be done. Like ahead of that, it's kind of scary. And I got to think that's not just South Carolina. I mean, that's probably, I would say, easily the entire South.
Yeah. I think different states have different issues. So
probably
like
right.
In South Carolina, I think a bad driving issues is being never using your blinker.
Yeah.
Cruising in the left lane instead of passing.
Well, they passed that law.
It's worked so well.
You're not gonna enforce that.
Like, all of our police officers are busy like being SROs in our schools and they don't do any traffic stops anymore.
Yeah.
But passing the law made a big difference. It has made a little bit difference, but there's still people who cruise in the left lane, because whatever. So that's a South Carolina issue. But when I lived in Massachusetts, they have different issues. And their issues are if your car is not rolling within 0.1 second of that light going green, then you're going to get honked at. Right? It is like aggressive.
We have some transplants that are down
They're
here.
bringing that.
I don't know if you've experienced that one.
Nope.
And me being a tried and true Southerner, I get instantly angry. But I learned to control myself.
And then they also have this really bad habit in Massachusetts of like trying to wave someone in front of them who needs to turn left. So if you're stopped,
I know that one drives me crazy.
and they wave, so like I never pulled out in front of someone like that in Massachusetts. I know someone in Massachusetts who was T-boned because someone was like, "Yeah, go
Right.
ahead."
You're like, there's another lane behind
There's
you, bro.
another lane. There's
Yeah.
more cars.
Yeah.
But like, I just remember in Massachusetts one time, this guy's like, "Go ahead." I'm like, "No, go."
No.
If you had gone, I could have gone
And
behind
they get
you.
mad at you.
And then they're like, "Fuck
you.
you."
You
And I'm
didn't
just
go.
like, so Massachusetts has its own.
You didn't accept me
issues.
being nice. You go to hell.
Like I didn't request that, you know. Ugh.
I love you, man. I think so if you're this type of athlete, right? You're a type of person that does triathlons. I mean, you're a lot of people think it's just the event, right? They see the crazy, run, bike, swim. They see the ultra marathon distance, but it's really in the training, right? That's where all the growth and the effort and all the work goes into it. But the type of person to do that, to put that effort in there, you're the type of person that you seek perfection, right? You incrementally work to make things better. I mean, you're definitely not a quitter, right? I mean, those are important qualities that go into, like a lot of the stuff that we do this whole show for, right? That's the whole point. Those other things, when you see people out in the world that just aren't doing those things, how does that make you feel?
I mean,
it's frustrating, right?
It can be. I will just say that like I can't expend too much energy on what other people are doing,
Yeah.
right? I think with sort of like endurance stuff, and I'm sure strength events as well, it's about consistency. Like
Yeah.
you know, as a person before having a coach, you think like, oh, I've got to run 26.2 miles. I need to work up to that in training. So you might start with 5 and then you do 10 and whatever. And that's like a great way to get injured. And I tell runners who I see doing that, when they get that perfectionist aspect of like, I'm watching a couple of friends who are training for the Marine Corps Marathon, and they've clearly bought like a training plan. And, one of them said like, I only manage 18 miles a day, even though 20 was on the list. And I was like, look, like, it doesn't matter.
right.
This time on the road. And then another big thing that people don't realize is like, I never run 26.2 miles in training. Like,
yeah, that seems like a bad idea.
The only time, I mean, the longest before my first Ironman, which was last year, the longest I'd ever run was 16 miles. And so the first time I ever went beyond that was 7 or 8 hours into this long distance event.
Right.
Like, you don't need to do the distance in order to do that. You just need to be consistent with doing it. And so
that's the whole idea, the race, the event. That's the thing that you're striving for. Yeah. Why would you do that in training 3 or 4 times before you get there?
It's like, I think it's just like a human thing to like, you don't have confidence unless you do it. And you have to like learn to have confidence in your body that it can do other things. And yeah, the furthest I ever ran for my ultra marathon, I just did Ironman training and then did the ultra marathon because I told myself, well, I do events on multiple times a year that take anywhere between 5 hours and 13 hours. 35 miles should take me anywhere between 6 and 8 hours. So like it's going to hurt, but
I've done this much time.
I can do it. I know my legs will keep moving.
Right.
Like that's another thing is like, it doesn't feel good to do those distances. Like your legs be like, what are you doing? And you get to a point where walking and running, neither feels good.
Right.
But you're like, I'm just going to keep
moving
going
forward. Yeah. Yes. Always my feet. My feet always kill me the most.
I didn't have that. I had pain behind my knees for the ultra marathon. I don't know what that was about. I don't know. I think it was sinking in the sand, like maybe my heel going lower than my toes. Yeah. So it felt like I'd like overextended backwards my knee.
Yeah, your toes. Yeah. That's rough. What's some of the craziest stuff you've done? I mean, you sound like you have smart training, but I'm sure you've done some silly things.
In training or just on the race? Oh God. So during COVID, obviously during 2020, they kind of canceled a bunch of the races. And so it's really hard for me to train if I don't have a race to train for.
Gotcha.
Because like, why would you otherwise? Sometimes it's even hard for me to train when I have a race to train.
So you're
for.
not the type of person that would just do it anyway. you need that goal
I need, yeah,
or the
exactly.
thing.
I need the thing, yeah. So like when I first started getting fit, like in my late 20s, early 30s, and I was doing the gym thing, like at some point I was like, oh, this is what am I working towards?
Mhm.
You know, I don't want to be a fitness model. That doesn't interest me. So like this
Mhm.
gym stuff just kind of lost thing. That's why I was like, I'm going to start running because I can do 5Ks and
Right.
10Ks. Like I want something to work towards. But our coaches did during 2020 like give us some challenges so that we could kind of keep up. And
Okay.
so I did do like a self-supported 70.3 in my town where I swam in the lake and rode my bike and then ran around for a little bit. Um, I don't know. I
That's
mean,
cool.
crazy stuff really certainly happens on race day. Last year I did 70.3 World Championships in St. George, Utah. And during that, we had insane weather just blow through. Like it felt like a hurricane.
Oh, wow.
It was like my everlasting memory of that is the wind coming across the desert and looking at the women in front of me, and we were all sideways on our bikes, leaning into that wind to try
Wow.
and stay on the bike, and it was just like
That's cool.
so wet,
That's
and
very
it was
cool.
just insane, and you're just like in survival mode at that point.
Why am I here mode?
No, I
No?
mean, it's survival mode,
Okay.
which I actually kind of like. I think that's why I'm an endurance junkie. Like I like to get to that point where it's survival mode. I
Mhm.
need to find a way to do that without running 35 miles or doing an Ironman, you know what I mean? Like, I need to find a way to find that mental clarity that doesn't involve so much physical stress.
Right.
But when you get down to survival mode, it is like a clarifying
It
experience.
is. It is.
You're not thinking about what you're gonna
Yeah.
eat, you're not thinking about what you look like, or like that conversation you had with someone or whatever you saw on social media,
Oh,
like it's gone. You're
absolutely.
just like survival mode.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the draw for endurance sports, but I do think for my mental health, I need to find that in other ways besides doing some extreme event every single time.
Hmm. You said you're an endurance junkie. I mean, that's
Mhm.
why?
I think that's it. I think as well, like the short, fast stuff is super painful and it just doesn't suit me. So, and I think there's studies out there. They're starting to study like in terms of like female athletes versus male athletes and what actually suits
Hmm.
that the body and what our strengths and weaknesses are. All of the modern sports that we know are created by men for men, and so
Right.
they do favor men. But if you get into the ultra endurance events, which I'm not doing, but like those 5 days across the desert events, the women are there, if not faster than the men.
Hmm.
There's a bike race called Ride Across America, and a woman won it this year by a lot.
Okay.
So like as women, we have endurance. There's something that keeps us going, that plays to our physical strengths to get way out there and still be able to keep
That's cool.
going. Whereas men have that like power,
Hmm.
sprint,
We just
something.
smash our heads into stuff.
Yeah. And us women we're still
Yeah.
going, pushing the baby out, taking care of the kids
Sure.
long term,
Sure. Maybe there's something there. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah. I mean, sure. I'm not really going to touch that any more than that.
I mean, I think it's interesting to think about,
It
what
is.
our strengths and weaknesses are. I think there's, we all have pros and cons, or I don't want to put labels on what's good and bad, but strengths and weaknesses,
Sure.
basically.
I can see that. Interesting. So your experience so far in life is just the endurance based things. Is there any other area that you kind of gravitate towards?
Fitness wise?
Sure. Spiritual wise, fitness wise.
I mean, fitness wise, I really enjoyed doing the ultra marathon because it was mostly like off-road in nature, and so
Yeah.
it feels more organic. Like I'm sure we all get that feeling. I used to get the feeling when you have like a fire and you look into that fire pit,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
you
right.
just feel, I don't know, I feel like ancestors,
Yeah. Very primal.
generations,
Oh, for sure.
and you're sitting there with your dog, and I look at my dog and I'm like, you used to be a wolf who
Yeah.
came up to the fire, and look at you
Yep.
now.
This could have been 8,000 years ago.
I know, right? Like
Yeah.
it feels like that. And so
Yeah.
when you're like moving yourself through the landscape like that, I feel very drawn to that. So I think I would like to find more experiences like that. I think I'm gonna do more or try and get into doing some gravel riding. So there seems to be a trend in triathlon. A lot of us are getting more scared of the roads. A lot of people are getting hit and killed out there. And so gravel riding has come up. It's basically like, it looks like a road bike, but it has a bigger clearance, bigger tires, so you can ride over dirt and gravel. And I mean, in these parts, we still have a lot of unpaved roads. So
Yeah, there's one in the Low Country. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the Hellhole gravel
Mhm.
grind. I've seen
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, that's where I grew up,
there you
in
go.
the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and like Saluda has got like
Yeah.
Saluda Roubaix and stuff like that. And so it's a good opportunity to, like, again, be out in the landscape
That's cool.
and not usually having cars, and it's a different style of riding. What I have figured out in like the few months that I've done gravel riding where I live is like, I think some of the roads around here remain unpaved because the grade is so steep they couldn't pave it, because there's something about gravel roads being crazy steep.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, you would never get this on the road. This is a very steep hill.
Right. I've run on a few that you question, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I mean, otherwise, I'm just still leaning into connecting with the land. So
Yeah.
me and my husband grow food. We have chickens, and I've gotten more into like learning about herbs and things that we would call weeds around us, things that people don't like, dandelions, pokeweed,
Okay.
maypop, and their medicinal values. And so I've done herbal courses online, and I'm seeking herbal teachers locally. I'm trying to really learn about the Sandhills region. There's not a lot of stuff out there, or I haven't found it yet. That's relative to this part of the South, because it's very different from the coastal plains. We have
Right.
Gullah Geechee culture down there.
Yep.
And then the Appalachian culture, which is like Cherokee and Scots Irish and stuff. And then there's this Sandhills bit that's kind of just trying to learn about
there.
it. Mm-hmm.
It's the ancient beachfront, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, why is that? What makes you interested in that in the first place? I mean, you mentioned medicinal value. I mean,
so it's really, I think it does go back to relationship with land. So we've talked about like Tyree's a special place for me. Scotland's a special place. When I grew up both in Scotland and here in South Carolina. And when I am in Scotland and all the times I'm there, I feel like a vibrational shift. Like my feet on that land feels right. It feels like old and ancient, and there's a love within me for that landscape, and I feel it within the population there as well, that there's a love for it, right?
Right.
And so when we would come over here to South Carolina, in my young mind, I wouldn't like it because it all felt so new. The reality is, I mean, South Carolina is just as old as Scotland is. It's not newer, right? It's the fact that what we have here is settler colonialism and white culture, and what we're taught is from white settlement forward. And so in your child's head, you're like, oh, this country is only 300 years old.
Well, it is.
The country is, but like we're completely discounting the Native Americans
well, we're
who
disconnected
lived here.
from it.
Exactly.
We're not connected at all.
Exactly. So, in my trajectory of life, it's turned out like in the 80s, I lived in Scotland, in the 90s at South Carolina, 2000s in Scotland. And then I joked that in 2020, it was time to move back to Scotland. I do it in like 10-year chunks. Well, we're past that. And I'm married, and we have chickens and dogs. And so I can't just like pack up. I wish we could snap our fingers and transport the chickens, but we can't. And so I really, in COVID, when everything slowed down and I was like on my property, I was like, I want to create a relationship with this land. This idea that it's new is not correct. And so I started like trying to identify the trees in my yard and all the stuff. And it just opened this world of things you can eat. We also have a disconnection with our food. We buy all of our food from the grocery store, but like, have you ever had hickory nut milk?
Me, no.
Right. So
that seems interesting though.
We have hickory nuts. And so I, YouTubed, blah, 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 like all these nuts falling from the tree. Why can't we eat this? Well, you can eat it. And this is how you eat it. Right. And look at these berries. Are they safe or not? Or mushrooms. Like I get boletes out of my yard. I do all that sort of stuff.
It's neat.
And then in terms of the medicinal value, I mean, I'm always trying to be healthy and self-care. Being self-employed, both me and my husband, we do not have good health insurance. I do not want to go to the doctor. I have a distrust of the US medical system for profit. And so
Yeah.
there's things in your body where you're like, well, I'm not acutely sick, but like I don't feel good today.
Yeah.
I want to get in front of that.
Right.
And our medical system doesn't really help us with that so much.
It's
It's-
reactionary.
It
Yeah,
is. It's reactionary.
Emergent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you have a headache, you take aspirin, but like there's
Right.
other ways you can. And by the way, aspirin comes from willow. It's just an extraction
Huh.
of salix. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So, and most of our medicines, our modern medicines, are extractions from plants. And so, why not go to the source
Sure.
and be like, grow
That's
this
incredible.
beautiful lemon balm that's like mood lifting and also incredibly safe. Like, you're not going to overdose on lemon balm.
Right. It's natural.
Whereas, like,
Sure.
you could like cause yourself ulcers if you're taking ibuprofen all the
Well,
time.
you absolutely will. Right.
You know,
Hmm.
so really leaning into that and trying to connect with the people who would have been on the land before the colonists were. And so I've made inroads with Catawba Nation, and I'm excited they're having their first event open to the public, which means open to non-Catawba citizens
Sure.
since COVID on November 19th. So I'm going to
Oh,
go
wow.
with a friend who's interested in food sovereignty work, and we're going to go to that and
It's very cool.
learn and try and, you know, get past this like colonial
Right.
settler thing that we have going on
Right.
around us and try and connect with what we can here locally.
That's awesome. There's a lot of wisdom there
Mm.
that we just kind of overlook. I mean, we spend like, not even a week in school, like from elementary to high school, like studying that stuff.
Yeah,
They were here thousands of years before we were.
absolutely.
And
And
there's so much wisdom.
it is crazy when you really start looking into it, and it's painful. I mean, the settlers came here and called it terra nullis,
Mm-hmm.
like basically like untouched land, which is
Yeah,
so
what
insulting.
about these dudes? They've been here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they called this continent the Garden of Eden. And it wasn't
Right.
the Garden of Eden because nobody was here.
Right.
It was because these people stewarded and tended this land
Yeah.
and made it the Garden of Eden. And white people be like, nah.
No, we're gonna farm it and
Yeah.
milk it dry.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. So how do you get there from the endurance stuff? I mean, do you feel like it's a natural like parallel?
I
Like
don't.
in a sense of
I definitely think there is a parallel in endurance sports just because you're spending so much time outside in landscape. And there's actually what I find interesting is at least in Ironman, at both the Ironman World Championships, which take place in Kona in Hawaii, and then at the 70.3 World Championships, which are in St. George, Utah. Both of those events, they call in the indigenous people. So the Native Hawaiians do like a ceremony and a send off, and they actually did the same thing in St. George with, I believe, someone from Diné, which we know as Navajo. So I think that's been a tradition with Kona since it started. So I think the original Ironman organizers kind of had that in mind, and that Ironman started in 1979. And so because it was like 5 people who did it, so they were just like in the ocean and on the bike and on the run, that there is that sort of like connection to land and respect for it, especially because you're moving so much slower through the landscape. In fact, sometimes I think being on the bike is too
Right.
fast, but
Right.
like when you're running, like you're interacting with it and you.
Well, I'd always had this vision of people that did like marathons, ultra marathons. It's like just hardcore hauling ass through the woods and stuff. And I had somebody tell me one time, they're like, nah, man, like I take pictures of all the flowers and mushrooms, and I'm like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so
It's a different mindset than like they're not all races are the same.
right.
Like a 5K, 10K, that's like you were saying, it's a fast thing versus a 50 plus. They're not running that same pace the whole time. It's
No.
very different.
Oh yeah, but there is a
Sometimes they stop and eat and take naps.
Oh yeah, there is a misconception. Like my mom had that misconception about like in Tyree in particular. She was like, "I'm so worried people are going to slip on the rocks," and I was like, "Look, we're
We're
not
gonna slow.
running the whole time." So like, yeah, I
Right.
did not run the whole time.
Right.
In Tyree, I think my pace was like 12.5-minute miles. So like, it was run walk.
Let's be clear, that's pretty fast.
I mean, I'm not saying it's slow either. It's not like well, to give perspective, if I was going to run on the road, I'd probably for a marathon, I'd want to be closer to 9-minute miles. So like it's It's a run walk. I can do a run walk for 12.5 minute miles. But I will say that those first endurance events were certainly taken by people who did have that relationship with land because they are spending so much time out there by themselves doing these things because nobody else was doing them.
Right.
Now, with the increase in human potential and also in the technology in triathlon, at least, it can be more like a 5K or a 10K where people are just blowing by.
Right.
And that's where I think that we were talking about certain athletes who do it for ego, where they just want to
That's what it
do
becomes.
the Ironman and get the tattoo. And it's not so connected to the land. And I am struggling a little bit with whether I do as many Ironman events next year, because I feel that ego and that consumerism in the sport a little bit too much. I mean, the Ironman brand and its events is expensive. I mean, those race entries are between $300 and $1,000 to do one of those races. And so it does bring that consumerism into it that I don't like. Whereas the Tyree Ultramarathon or even other ultramarathon events draw a different type of people, a little bit more gritty. They don't spend, thousands of dollars on a pair of running shoes. But as ultramarathoning gets more popular, that will creep into it as well.
It does with everything. And that's man, could you imagine being like one of the first? There's like only 10 of you out there. That'd be crazy.
I know.
You're like, I hope we know what we're doing because you might die.
Yeah, I know.
You might literally get washed out into the ocean.
I know. I mean, and I'm thinking like, what's the next thing like that? Swim run has gotten popular in the past few years, which is, swim across a lake, run across an island, swim across the ocean, run across an island. And that attracts me as well. I'd like to do something like that. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you don't do it you don't do it to claim the prize.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's nice to be on the podium, but I'm also not the fastest woman out there.
Sure.
And so I have to find enjoyment in it in some other way. So it's not a comparative, because comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Absolutely.
So there's always someone who's better than you.
Right.
And for some reason, if you come in third, you only see the 2 women in front of you and not the 300 other women behind you. Like your point of view gets really skewed. And so I have to find other things that make it enjoyable. And so it is that time out on the land. Last year at St. George, after that hurricane thing blew through, I was trying to get my wits about me and trying to get back into rhythm on the bike, because that was pure survival mode at that point. And I started to smell what smelled like mugwort, which was a herb that I was learning about. I saved some from the side of the road in my neighborhood, and I'd been burning it the weeks prior. It's good for lucid dreaming.
Okay.
And so so I'm on my bike and I'm smelling mugwort, and I'm just like, what is it? Like, I took it as like, it's a spiritual experience, right?
Really.
I'm just like, the land is talking to me. It's sending me on my way.
That's cool. And
then afterwards, I looked it up, and it was like white sage, which is in the Artemisia family. So it's a relative of mugwort. But I was like, that's a sign that I need right now to kind of get my head about me and stick with it and keep going. So
it's very cool. Yeah. That's a good story. Wow. So anything that you want to part ways with here? Any lessons?
Marathoners don't run the whole thing.
You just pulled the veil off of that.
Yeah.
one.
Oh, I mean, some of them do. Like, it took me 7 hours and 7 minutes to do the 34/35 miles.
Yeah.
The winners did it in like 4 hours and 14 minutes, which is like, they ran the whole thing, which is insane.
There's always people that finish the Boston Marathon in like 2.5 hours or something.
I'm like, more power to, but the rest of us regular people, you don't run the whole thing. You can do it. Like, people are like, I could never do what you do. You absolutely can. It literally just takes like the consistency, and it's taken me 10 years to get up to doing this sort of distance. I guess I kind of have the fear of like, if I stop, I won't be able to do it again. And I need to get over that because there's always different seasons in life. And I'm struggling with, we spoke a lot about what I'm doing on a planning commission, and that is, it is mentally and emotionally wearing. And so I don't have the capacity to train the way I could when I didn't have that on my plate. And so different seasons of life.
Interesting.
Do I need to back off and do to make it work for me? Certainly.
Do you feel like you can back off of that?
I'm going to have a chat with my coach. I think that's what's great about having a coach, right? I
Right.
think if you're just trying to hold yourself accountable, you can get way too much into that perfectionism of like,
Yeah.
these are all my workouts I have to do and I didn't do it and therefore I'm going to fail. And that's not the truth.
Right.
It has, again, it's that consistency of doing something every day. You have to give yourself grace. I say this to myself because I need to do it for myself. I struggle. But yeah, I think I'll be having a conversation with my coach about what does next year look like. This is what's on my plate, and I'm drawn to gravel. So can we do more gravel? And I don't want to do an Ironman next year, so let's not do that. Yeah.
Take it off the table.
Yeah, it's just the Ironman is. I love the distance. If I could just show up and do an Ironman, I would do it. But you have to train a lot. So there's like your weekends are 5 to 8 hours of training on a weekend.
Takes a lot.
And I just struggled and wasn't able to do it this year. I was like, and it wasn't even a physical capacity. It was the mental capacity of getting on the road and understanding that someone's going to tell you they're going to kill you, like that's exhausting as well. So.
Well, I wish you well.
Thank you.
I hope you get it figured out.
Yeah.
I think you will.
And definitely. It's just, changing. And, again, as humans, we're changing all the time. So our interests change. And I think I think we also have to be aware of like not getting too attached to an identity, right? Like, yeah, I do triathlon, but I'm also a business owner and I'm very, very passionate about trying to make change in my local community.
Yeah.
But if I'm tied to like Fiona the triathlete and I get injured or
that's devastating at that point.
I just can't do what I used to do, then it causes you a lot of pain that's not necessary. Like you're a human, we're multifaceted, but it's easy.
Great advice.
It's easy for people to put us in a box, and it's too easy for us to accept that box. So yeah, I'm big about like trying not to get too attached to an identity because it's always going to change beyond the identity of I am Fiona Martin. That's it. And I have I'm not going to say I have way too many interests. I have a ton of interests. So,
right. Yeah. You can't be so shallow just to be identified as one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what a lot of younger folks do. Like in the industry that we work in, on our day jobs, I think you wind up getting identified, or you want to be identified by the work you put out, and then you live your life by that. And then like you live and die by how, great your projects are or whatever. And it's just
there's so little control you have over like your projects as well.
It's such a road to burnout too. And you see people getting burned out.
I think it's tough as well because there is this like personal branding aspect of modern culture, people who do make money from just being online, which is a very tiny, tiny group of people.
Right.
But there is this like, just like when you're in school and you think you're going to be that professional basketball player, like that's a very tiny group of people who can do that. It's equally a very tiny group of people who can be making money off of Instagram and YouTube.
Well, that's
but it is seen as like, I'm going to sell merch on YouTube.
Yeah. Good luck. You're
Yeah.
not going to do it.
No.
It's like 1% of. Yeah. Wow. That's some great advice to part with. I like that. I need to listen to that too myself. That's good stuff. Well, thanks for talking.
Yeah.
You, my friend, are a warrior. I will tell you that much. And I'm a fan, and I watch most of the stuff you do on Facebook. So keep posting it.
Yeah, we all have something. I think I have female warrior energy, which is a little bit different from male warrior energy, but not any better or worse.
Yeah, I dig it. You for sure are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.